Hello once again, everyone. I'm Owen Wine. This is Pathfinders, and we're getting right into talking about Egypt and Babylon once again. In 587 BC, Babylon marched on Jerusalem and conquered it, and a year later burned it to the ground. Earlier, in 701 BC, Assyria rose to power and once again conquered Jerusalem. Much later, in 64 BC, Rome ruled over Jerusalem, and later in 70 AD, they too burned Jerusalem to the ground. In all of these cases of the Jewish people being enslaved and conquered, they were always taken from their homes and sent into exile, forced to work and submit to the ruling power of that time. This experience of being ruled over by an oppressive ruler was well known to Daniel in the Bible. The oppressive force of his day was known as Babylon. Daniel described how Babylon twisted and blurred the lines of what good and evil were, and forced others, those who were exiled and its citizens, to submit to those definitions. Despite this oppression, Daniel held high hopes because he had this vision in which he saw a king coming down from God, and this king would stop all of these evil forces who would oppress and put others into exile. Now, while this is a hopeful image, unfortunately Daniel saw something all the more sorrowful. He saw that after Babylon fell, another oppressive empire would take its place, and after that empire would fall, another one would take its place. And even still, after this third evil empire fell, another one would rise to power and take its place. Because Daniel saw that more nations would follow in the path of Babylon, being an evil force ruled by a king who wants to redefine good and evil, Babylon became a symbol for any oppressive ruling human force that demands others to submit to its idolatrous failure to rightly define good and evil. Now that may sound confusing, so let's give an example. In the book of Daniel, the king of Babylon redefined good and evil by making people bow down to a statue as if it were God. He's basically saying it is a good thing to do this evil thing. Another example could be from Jesus' time. The quote-unquote Babylon/oppressive empire of his day was Rome. It forced people to pay outrageous taxes as a form of submission to Caesar's redefinition of power as the ability to oppress others. Despite how bad Babylon and Rome and all of these evil human forces have been, Peter in the New Testament told the followers of Jesus to still respect those who rule over them. He told them to love others no matter how they treat you. Now that might sound a bit strange because Peter lived more than 1,000 years after Babylon in history was destroyed. But you see here, Peter is using the identity of Babylon, what it stands for, as a way to describe the current stage of things. Peter made the observation that humanity for the longest time has lived in Babylon. For Peter in his day, it was the economic and military power of Rome. For us in our day, it could be any human force that tries to redefine good and evil on its own terms. Babylon fundamentally is a human force that requires others to submit to its redefinitions of good and evil. Now, I'm sure you could think of any number of human institutions that don't really align with the God of the Bible's definitions of what good and what's bad. And those, according to the Bible, depending on their extremity, would be examples of Babylon. If we take Peter and Jesus' advice, thinking that we all live and work in Babylon, the real question becomes, how do we live in Babylon while not participating in its idolatry and yet still loving others? This question has been frequently addressed by many biblical characters and is one of the core problems people in the Bible and people nowadays have trouble solving. Because Babylon was the first big example to Israel of oppression and mass idolatry, it's become the symbol of all human-run governments and institutions and groups that make others abide by their definitions of what is good and evil. Now, how this Babylon idea relates to our day and how we're supposed to respond to Babylon, all this and more we will address and talk about in our next video. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Owen Wine. This is Pathfinders. See you next time.